For Class 1 devices, the route to CE mark is quite clear and can be realized by the manufacturer rather independently. But how about other classes of medical devices? Well, that's a bit more complicated, and because those routes are more complicated and the devices involve higher risks, we can't just let manufacturers do this process alone, but the MDR requires an independent party to be involved. More specifically, a notified body. A notified body is an independent company that has been approved by the national government's competent authority, which usually is the health inspectorate, like in the Netherlands, and that do the conformity assessment of products of manufacturers. Such a notified body is on one hand a commercial company because manufacturers have to pay them for their services, but it is also a delegated party of the health inspectorate. And that's why the notified body itself is also regularly audited to check if they do their work correctly. If you want to know more about the tasks, obligations and regulations concerning notified bodies, check Chapter 4 of the MDR. But for now, let's get back to the conformity assessment routes. This is a table that shows the things involved in getting your Class 1 device CE marked. You need your technical file, a post-market surveillance plan, write up your conformity declaration and register your device at the competent authority. However, if your device is delivered sterile, contains some measuring function, or is reusable, you also have to have a quality management system in place and follow MDR Annex 9, Chapters 1 and 3. This is a system that ensures your product quality is monitored and registered so that if anything goes wrong with it, it doesn't go unnoticed and you can fix it timely. And very importantly, for these classes of devices, you must involve a notified body to check and confirm that you complied with the MDR and get regular audits from them. For all types of Class 1 devices, this involvement only relates to the sterile, measuring or reusable aspects involved. However, this involvement of a notified body is obligatory for the entire conformity process for all higher class devices. Depending on the class of device, there are various specifics that you need to take into account, but we'll just highlight some of the bigger differences and more important aspects. For example, for Class 2 and 3 devices, the notified body has to issue an EU Quality Assurance Certificate for your product. MDR Annex 12 tells you all about such certificates issued by notified bodies. The center columns of this table are about the same thing, conformity assessment. And you'll find all about it in Annexes 9 to 11. But in general, these all boil down to this. There are 3 types of conformity assessment that can be allowed depending on the type of medical device. First, there's conformity assessment based on quality management systems and technical documentation. That means that you make sure your production process is certified and has all kinds of production process checks in place, and maybe some batch checks or samples of your products. That way you don't have to check the quality of every product. Luckily, because that would be very expensive and time consuming if you produce thousands of products. But by ensuring that your production process is exactly the same every time, you ensure that what comes out of it, your product, is also the same every time. Now, type investigation means that conformity is checked based on all available documentation and outcomes of clinical studies, and based on checking a representative sample of the device production. And finally, for product verification, each and every device has to be tested and checked to ensure it conforms to the MDR requirements. As you can understand, this is the most laborious and expensive way of checking for large production numbers. But for small production numbers, this can still be cheaper than getting the entire production process certified. Now, you can't just pick whatever conformity assessment approach you want to take, but the MDR does provide some choices depending on the class of device. Those are all extensively described in MDR Chapter 5, Article 52. If you happen to be developing a Class 3 medical device, you have really hit the conformity routes bingo. Because for Class 3 devices, it is obligatory to not just have the technical file of your device, but to also have a design file that shows for all your relevant design steps why you took one design option over another. And only for Class 3 devices, before you can get a CE mark, your investigational device dossier, including all your validation studies, etc., must be reviewed by an EU panel of experts. And that can take months. Now, you might be wondering how much time and money it may take to get through all these steps, especially when having to involve a notified body. Well, that's a bit hard to answer, as it depends very much on the kind of device and on how experienced and well-equipped your company is. But in general, for a simple Class 1 device, the R&D can be as quick as a year and the CE review about a month, while for Class 3 devices, this can be as much as 20 years of R&D and many months of or even years of review and improvement of the CE documentation. For cost, the range also depends per country. In some countries, you could register a Class 1 device for as little as €100, while the total cost of involving a notified body for CE mark and Class 3 device can be many tens of thousands of euros. That sounds like a lot, but what's important to realize is that in the context of the total development of medical devices, only a relatively small part is used for your MDR obligations. And that makes this whole set of rules and regulations and your obligations to follow them a relatively small burden to take for ensuring that medical devices and thus your users and patients will be safe.